Chapter 1: The Unspoken Bond. Two identical girls stood facing each other in the dimly lit room, their reflections merging in a cracked mirror behind them. June and Jennifer Gibbons, born in 1963 to Gloria and Aubrey Gibbons in the quaint town of Haverfordwest, Wales, shared more than just their appearance. From the earliest days of their childhood, they inhabited a world where words held little meaning and silence spoke volumes. Their home, nestled at the end of a quiet street, outwardly appeared like any other in the neighborhood. Yet within its walls, an unsettling quiet reigned. June and Jennifer moved with a synchronicity that bordered on eerie, their actions mirroring each other's with uncanny precision. They communicated in a language known only to them, a rapid, garbled speech that baffled those who attempted to understand. To their parents, Gloria and Aubrey, the twins' bond was both a source of fascination and concern. Efforts to coax them into verbal communication often met with stoic resistance, or at best, indecipherable muttering. As the girls grew older, their withdrawal from the world intensified. They developed a reputation among their peers as enigmatic figures, their dark, penetrating gazes seeming to hold secrets beyond reach. At school, June and Jennifer were a curiosity. They moved through the corridors like shadows, rarely interacting with others except in moments of necessity. Attempts by teachers to integrate them into class discussions were met with uncomfortable silence or cryptic, fleeting responses. Their classmates, unable to penetrate the twins' insular world, oscillated between intrigue and discomfort. In their shared bedroom, June and Jennifer found solace in writing. They filled notebooks with intricate tales, often veering into dark themes and troubled characters. Their diaries became a sanctuary where they poured out thoughts and emotions they dared not speak aloud. To Gloria and Aubrey, glimpses into these private writings offered fleeting insights into their daughters' minds, but brought little clarity to their increasingly isolated world. As adolescence approached, the twins' behavior took on a more defiant edge. They ventured into petty crimes, stealing small items and occasionally vandalizing property. It was as though they were testing the boundaries of their silent pact, pushing against the confines of their existence with a growing sense of recklessness. One autumn evening, as twilight descended over Haverfordwest, June and Jennifer sat side by side on their shared bed. A silent understanding passed between them, unspoken yet palpable. Their eyes, dark and intense, reflected a shared determination to defy the constraints that had bound them in silence for so long. It was a decision that would alter the course of their lives irrevocably. As they prepared to embark on a journey of silent rebellion, neither June nor Jennifer could foresee the profound consequences their actions would unleash. The bond that had shielded them from the world was about to be tested in ways they could scarcely imagine. Chapter 2: Whispers in the Dark. Two shadowy figures stood before the smoldering remains of a barn, their silhouettes blending into the night as flames licked the sky. The fire was their creation, the product of a silent agreement made in the depths of their shared world. June and Jennifer Gibbons, hands intertwined, watched the fire burn with grim satisfaction. It was their boldest act yet. The old barn, standing on the outskirts of Haverfordwest, had long been abandoned, an easy target for the twins. For them, it wasn't just an act of destruction. It was a silent scream, a rebellious declaration against the world that had failed to understand them. They had crossed a line, moving from petty crimes to arson, and the thrill of it coursed through their veins like a drug. The sound of approaching sirens broke the stillness of the night. But June and Jennifer didn't flinch. They stood rooted to the spot, reveling in the chaos they had unleashed. In the days following the fire, Haverfordwest buzzed with whispers. The silent twins had always been the subject of gossip, but now the town's curiosity turned to fear. People crossed the street when they saw the girls, their eyes filled with suspicion. They no longer saw June and Jennifer as merely odd or withdrawn. They saw them as dangerous. The twins, however, seemed to thrive in this atmosphere of fear. Their silent smiles unnerved those around them, and their presence was a constant reminder of the barn that had burned under the cover of night. At home, tension simmered just beneath the surface. Gloria and Aubrey Gibbons were at their wits' end. Their daughters, once merely strange and uncommunicative, had now become a source of dread. The once peaceful home had turned into a battleground of strained silences and futile attempts at discipline. But June and Jennifer remained unresponsive, their blank stares offering no answers. The parents' frustration grew, as did their helplessness. It was as if their daughters had sealed themselves in a world impenetrable to all but each other. One evening, as the family sat in silence around the dinner table, a knock at the door shattered the fragile calm. Gloria exchanged a worried glance with Aubrey before opening the door to reveal two police officers standing on the front step. "We need to speak with June and Jennifer Gibbons," one of the officers said, his voice stern but laced with hesitation. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but heavy with implication. June and Jennifer were led away in handcuffs that night, their faces expressionless, their silence more oppressive than ever. The justice system, unprepared for the complexity of their case, was at a loss. The twins refused to speak, refused to cooperate, maintaining an eerie stoicism throughout their brief interactions with the authorities. Their actions had escalated beyond harmless rebellion, yet the authorities found themselves unable to fully understand the depths of what they were dealing with. After much deliberation, it was decided that June and Jennifer would be sent to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility. The crimes they had committed, coupled with their uncooperative silence, convinced the courts that they needed more than punishment. They needed treatment. As the heavy gates of Broadmoor closed behind them, a new chapter in the twins' lives began. Inside the hospital's cold, sterile walls, their connection to each other would be tested in ways they could never have anticipated. The silence that had been their shield from the outside world would soon become their prison, and the darkness that had long simmered beneath the surface was about to rise, threatening to consume them both. Chapter 3 of The Silent Twins. Broadmoor Hospital loomed like a fortress of forgotten souls, its imposing walls casting long shadows over the troubled minds contained within. For June and Jennifer Gibbons, it was a new kind of prison, one with no escape from the watchful eyes that sought to unravel the mysteries of their silence. The world they had controlled so completely, their private language, their shared thoughts, was now under siege. The twins were separated for the first time in their lives, a decision made by the hospital staff in an attempt to break their codependency. It was hoped that the distance would force them to interact with others, to speak, to break the silence that had defined them for so long. But what followed was not the desired breakthrough. It was something far more disturbing. Without the presence of her sister, each twin seemed to wither. June, always the quieter of the two, retreated deeper into herself, becoming almost catatonic. She would sit for hours in her cell-like room, staring blankly at the walls, refusing food and contact. Jennifer, too, faltered, her body growing weaker with each passing day. The doctors, baffled by the twins' physical and emotional deterioration, grew concerned. "They're fading away," Dr. Evan Williams, the lead psychiatrist, remarked to a colleague one evening, his voice heavy with frustration. "It's as if their will to live depends on each other." The separation experiment was swiftly abandoned. When the twins were finally reunited, the change was immediate and chilling. Color returned to their faces, and life flickered in their once dull eyes. But with that revival came a disturbing new pattern. June and Jennifer began to mirror each other in ways that went beyond their already eerie synchronization. On days when June appeared healthier and more energetic, Jennifer would fall ill. The stronger Jennifer became, the weaker June grew. It was as if they were locked in a grotesque dance of survival, each twin draining the other of life. The hospital staff observed the phenomenon with growing unease. Nurses whispered that they had seen the twins moving objects without touching them, or heard them speaking in their strange, guttural language during the dead of night, voices not meant for human ears. The strange aura that surrounded June and Jennifer seemed to intensify, feeding the sense that something far darker than a psychological disorder was at play. Dr. Williams struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. His scientific mind rejected the supernatural, yet the evidence before him defied explanation. He spent hours reviewing their case files, trying to pinpoint the moment when their shared delusion had taken on such an intense, almost otherworldly quality. "There's something else at work here," he confided to a nurse. "Something we don't understand." Over time, June and Jennifer became infamous within Broadmoor. Other patients viewed them with a mixture of fear and fascination. The twins, who had once used silence as a shield, now wielded it like a weapon. Their presence unsettled even the most hardened staff members, and rumors of their supernatural abilities spread like wildfire. But beneath the legends and the fear, something far more tragic was taking place. The bond that had once been their only source of strength was now mutating into something destructive. Their silence, which had been their sanctuary, was becoming a prison from which they could not escape. Day by day, they seemed to lose touch with reality, retreating deeper into a world where only the two of them existed. In their shared room, late at night, the twins would sit facing each other, their dark eyes locked in silent conversation. No one knew what passed between them in those moments, but the intensity of their gaze suggested that a decision was being made, a decision that would shape the course of their lives and the darkness they carried within them. And so, within the cold walls of Broadmoor, June and Jennifer stood at the edge of a precipice. Their bond, once a refuge, was now a tether pulling them towards something far more dangerous. Their silence had begun to whisper of things too terrible to understand, and their shared existence was unraveling, one eerie glance at a time. As the days turned into months and the seasons outside the hospital changed, a terrible truth began to emerge. The twins were locked in a battle not only with the world, but with each other. Their silence was no longer a source of power. It was a curse, one that bound them together and tore them apart in equal measure. And in the suffocating isolation of Broadmoor, that curse would lead them down a path from which only one of them would return. Chapter 4: Echoes of Silence. The day that would change everything dawned like any other in Broadmoor, cold, gray, and heavy with the weight of routine. To the staff, it was just another day in the hospital's endless cycle of medication, therapy sessions, and quiet despair. But to June and Jennifer Gibbons, something felt different. They sat across from each other in the recreation room, their eyes locked in an unspoken conversation as the rest of the world moved around them unnoticed. Dr. Evan Williams, who had been observing the twins for years, sensed the shift almost immediately. There was an unsettling stillness in the air, as if the very walls of Broadmoor were holding their breath. Watching the twins, he felt an inexplicable chill creep up his spine. Their usual synchronized movements seemed sharper, more deliberate, and their dark eyes held an intensity that unnerved even the most experienced staff members. Something was about to happen, though no one could say exactly what. Throughout the day, June and Jennifer's behavior grew increasingly erratic. They paced the sterile corridors in perfect unison, their footsteps echoing off the cold tiles like a countdown to something unknown. At times, they would stop abruptly, standing completely still, their heads tilted as if listening to a voice no one else could hear. Staff members reported a strange unease in their presence, a sense that something intangible but powerful was at work, just beyond the edge of perception. As dusk began to fall, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, casting the hospital in a foreboding gloom. By the time night settled over Broadmoor, a violent thunderstorm raged outside, shaking the old building with every crash of thunder. Lightning flashed in irregular bursts, illuminating the twins' room in brief, unsettling glimpses. One such flash revealed June and Jennifer standing face to face, their hands hovering just inches from each other, fingers almost touching. In the half-light of the storm, their silhouettes seemed to merge into one. Two bodies, one soul, bound by something no one else could understand. It was a night nurse making her rounds who first sounded the alarm. She found June sitting upright in bed, staring blankly ahead, her lips moving in a soundless conversation with the empty space in front of her. Jennifer, however, lay motionless beside her, her chest no longer rising and falling with breath. The nurse's scream echoed through the halls of Broadmoor, summoning doctors and staff in a frantic attempt to save a life already lost. Dr. Williams rushed to the scene, but one look at Jennifer's pale, still body confirmed what everyone feared. She was gone. The cause of death, however, remained a mystery. There were no signs of injury, no evidence of illness or trauma. It was as if Jennifer had simply stopped living, her life extinguished without warning, without reason. She said we couldn't both live, June whispered, breaking the silence that had defined her existence for so many years. Her voice, raspy and thin from disuse, carried a weight of finality. One of us had to die so the other could be free. The doctors were stunned. It was the first coherent sentence June had spoken in decades, but its meaning was as cryptic as it was chilling. They tried to revive Jennifer, but all efforts were in vain. Her body was lifeless, her spirit gone, leaving behind only a shell. The staff, accustomed to the strange and unsettling, found themselves at a loss. How could one twin simply decide to die? And why now, after so many years of shared silence, had June chosen to speak? The questions haunted Dr. Williams as he signed the death certificate, the empty cause of death line staring back at him like an accusation. In the days that followed, Broadmoor was abuzz with rumors. Some whispered that the twins had made a pact, a secret agreement forged in their silent world that only they could understand. Others speculated that something far more sinister had taken place, that Jennifer had willingly sacrificed herself to free June from the suffocating bond that had trapped them both for so long. But whatever the truth, the reality was undeniable. Jennifer Gibbons was dead, and June was alone for the first time in her life. The transformation in June was immediate. She began to speak regularly, her voice gaining strength with each passing day. She engaged with the hospital staff, answering questions, participating in therapy sessions, even smiling on occasion. It was as though the weight of Jennifer's presence had lifted, allowing June to step into a new version of herself, one that had been hidden beneath the surface all along. Yet even as June appeared to thrive, there was an unease that lingered among those who had known the twins. The bond between them had been so intense, so all-encompassing, that its sudden severance left a void no one could fill. And while June's outward behavior seemed to improve, there were moments when she would retreat into herself, her eyes distant, her lips moving in silent whispers, speaking to a sister who was no longer there. Dr. Williams, deeply affected by the case, continued to monitor June closely. He was fascinated by the transformation, but couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unresolved. One day, during a routine session, he asked June the question that had been haunting him since Jennifer's death. "Do you miss her?" he asked gently. June's eyes flickered, her expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as though she might not answer. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she replied, "She's still with me." It was a simple statement, but its implications were profound. Jennifer's death had not truly freed June. It had only changed the nature of their bond. The silence that had once defined them had been broken, but its echo lingered in the spaces between words, in the quiet moments when June seemed to listen to something no one else could hear. As time passed, June began to write long, fevered journal entries that filled notebook after notebook. She wrote about her life with Jennifer, about their shared world, about the silence that had shaped them both. But as the entries progressed, they became darker, more fragmented, as though she were grappling with forces beyond her control. In the quiet of her room, June would sometimes sit by the window, watching the rain fall outside, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the glass. And though she was alone in body, she was never truly alone in spirit. The echo of her bond with Jennifer lingered, an eternal reminder of the price of their shared silence. And as the staff moved on, as the world outside Broadmoor continued without them, June Gibbons remained a woman who had lived her entire life in the shadow of another, now trying to find her way in a world defined by the silence left behind. Chapter 5: The Mirror Without Reflection. In the months following Jennifer's death, June Gibbons became something of a mystery in her own right. At first, her transformation appeared miraculous to the doctors and staff at Broadmoor. After decades of muteness and isolation, she had begun to talk, to explain herself in ways that no one thought possible. The weight of the silence that had defined the twins for so long seemed lifted. Yet it was clear to those who paid attention that June had not fully escaped the world she and Jennifer had created. Dr. Williams spent more time with her than ever before, captivated by this sudden, inexplicable change. In their sessions, June would recount childhood memories, fragments of her and Jennifer's private language, stories of the imaginary worlds they had built, and the suffocating intensity of their bond. She spoke of Jennifer often in a way that was both tender and eerie, as if her sister's presence had not fully left. I can hear her sometimes, June confided one afternoon, her voice calm, betraying no fear. She whispers to me when I'm alone. She's not gone, not really. We never could be apart, not entirely. Dr. Williams was unsure whether these statements were a symptom of grief, delusion, or something far deeper. The intensity of their relationship had always been beyond his full understanding, beyond anyone's. The twins had created their own reality, and perhaps June had not truly stepped out of it after all. Despite her newfound speech, despite her interactions with the outside world, it was clear that she was still tethered to the shadow of Jennifer's presence. June spent her days in Broadmoor writing feverishly, filling notebook after notebook with a stream of consciousness that oscillated between clarity and incoherence. At times, her words were a cathartic release, a way of processing her life without Jennifer. At others, they were cryptic, almost as if Jennifer herself were guiding her hand from beyond the grave. I'm free now, June would write, only to cross the words out moments later. But she's not. The staff grew uneasy. June's behavior, though outwardly improved, held an undercurrent of something dark and unsettled. She no longer spoke in riddles like before, but there were times when her gaze would shift, when her eyes would glaze over and she would fall into a silent trance. Those who watched her couldn't help but feel as though she were conversing with someone unseen, someone who still held her tightly in their grasp. One evening, during a quiet storm, June experienced a particularly troubling episode. She was found standing in front of the large mirror in her room, staring at her own reflection for hours. Her hand moved slowly, tracing the outline of her face in the glass, but her eyes were distant, focused on something beyond the reflection itself. "She's there," June whispered to a passing nurse who had stopped to check on her. "She's waiting for me." The nurse, unsettled, hurried to inform Dr. Williams. By the time he arrived, June had snapped out of the trance-like state, but the air in the room felt heavy with an unspoken presence. Dr. Williams carefully approached June, his voice soft but probing. "June, what do you see?" he asked gently, though the answer both intrigued and unnerved him. June looked at him, her expression blank, then back at the mirror. "I see her," she replied simply. "She's always there. When I look at myself, I see both of us." The statement sent a shiver through the doctor, but he kept his composure. "Is she speaking to you, June?" "Not speaking, just watching. She's waiting." Her voice was steady, but her words carried a strange, melancholic weight. It was as if Jennifer's death had not freed her at all, but had rather shifted their bond into something that transcended life itself. In the weeks that followed, June's behavior became more erratic. She stopped attending her therapy sessions, preferring to isolate herself in her room. The mirror became a focal point, a window into the part of her world that no one else could see. She would spend hours standing in front of it, her face expressionless, her mind somewhere else entirely. Despite her withdrawal, she continued writing, endless pages filled with reflections on identity, on life and death, and most disturbingly, on her connection with Jennifer. One journal entry read, "She is still with me. In every breath I take. I am her. I was never me without her. There is no me." The handwriting on the page grew erratic, the letters slanting wildly across the paper. "I am her now." Dr. Williams, increasingly concerned, decided to confront June directly. He needed to understand what was happening inside her mind, to see if there was any way to break the hold that Jennifer seemed to have over her, even in death. "June," he began carefully during one of their final sessions, "you say that Jennifer is still with you. But what about you? What about June? Who is June without Jennifer?" For the first time in weeks, June's expression changed. She looked up, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "There is no June without Jennifer," she said slowly, her voice carrying a quiet certainty. "There never was." Dr. Williams felt a deep sadness in her words, as if June had accepted that her identity had been consumed by her twin long before death had taken Jennifer. It was clear that their bond, forged in silence and isolation, was unbreakable, even in the face of mortality. By the end of the year, June's mental state had deteriorated further. She spoke less and less, retreating into a world that existed solely between her and the reflection in the mirror. The staff reported hearing her murmur softly at night, carrying on conversations with someone who was no longer there. And then one cold winter morning, June was found sitting in front of the mirror, her eyes wide open but unseeing. Her body was limp, her pulse faint but steady. She was alive, but she had retreated into a place no one could reach, a place where Jennifer still existed, where the silence between them was unbroken, eternal. Dr. Williams watched helplessly as June slipped away, not in body, but in spirit. He knew now that the bond between the twins could never be severed. They were two halves of a whole, a reflection without end. And as he stood by the mirror in her room, he couldn't help but feel that somewhere, in the depths of that glass, Jennifer was watching too. June Gibbons, the silent twin, had become a living ghost, haunted the echo of a life she could never truly escape.